now come to order. We'll begin with introduction of members and seating of alternates. And we'll begin with town staff. Dawn?
Dawn Bennett, recording secretary.
And Dan?
Dan Beret, town planner.
Okay, no one else from town. For commission members, we'll do introductions starting on my left.
Victoria Chat.
Bob Ellsworth.
Chantel Foster.
Carolyn Freeman.
Robert Taylor.
Ken Kearns, alternate.
Okay, thank you. We will not seat any alternates tonight. Next item is to accept the agenda. So this is a revised agenda. We all have the updated version in front of us. So may I have a motion to accept the agenda, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the agenda is accepted as presented. So we'll start with our regular meeting, and we have 2 applications to receive in. The first is application 22-06, Penfield Hill Road and Stephen Tom Road, proposed 8-lot re-subdivision with wetlands on site. Application and property of Robert W. Olson, map 61, lot 14, zone RR.
Bob, that won't be able to open till the first meeting in November.
Okay. Thank you. And the next application is number 22-07, 185 Marlborough Street, Unit 3. Request for site plan review for 1 station hair salon with facilities for spray tanning, lash extensions, makeup, and waxing. Application of Laura Bratz and property of Rosario V. Agostino, map 20, lot 202, zone B2. Anything on that one, Dan?
No, that, she definitely would like to be heard. That actually won't be heard, I don't think, till till November as either because of noticing requirements. We didn't receive it in time to notice it for the second meeting in October, so that'll be first meeting in November as well.
Okay, thanks. Next item is new business, and I see none listed. Anything you'd like to mention?
Nope, not at this time, unless you guys have any questions about anything going on in town.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to old business. So we have, first topic is our update to our zoning regulations for cannabis.
Yeah, so I just took a first crack at this. What I did was I'd like to include all these definitions in section 2. It's kind of just a replacement for all the footnotes that John Herring was going to do. Just and it's just useful on enforcement side and to have everything defined. It came up that not having a definition hindered me and somebody else earlier this week because I'd like to keep everything as cut and dry as possible and as little interpretation as possible. So this kind of adds that. I'll probably section off the definitions for just a box for cannabis. I actually will probably keep person on its own just to have a definition of person in the future in the regs.
Already in there.
Is it?
Yes.
It's 2.2 under specific terms, number 5.
Okay.
It's not as detailed as what you have here, and I like your version better. But it is in there.
Okay, so then we'll do that as a replacement. Thank you. I didn't even notice that. Okay, and then going to the use tables, I think we kind of hashed out no B3 last time in terms of cannabis things. Now, the one question that I did end up putting just as special permit was for cultivation. I guess the main question was the IP zone I had in the RI zone, and then retail store in the industrial zone. So whether you want retail to be a possibility industrial, we don't really have a retail or dispensary retail function in the industrial zone right now, but I didn't know if you thought a dispensary would be appropriate. But then also, I did put no cultivation for cannabis in the IP. That's kind of like where Dairy Queen is. That section is kind of the IP. It was a little more residential, but it certainly could be a possibility since, to me, it was a little analogous of the B2 zone. But I did keep special permit for RI. I wasn't sure if you wanted to do that just because you have like Oakwood soccer facility there, stuff like that, but we do have a small portion of I right north of there that if somebody wanted to, they could. So just wanted to get your feedback on those things. I guess we can start with that. Does that look good for you guys? Do you want to change anything, make tweaks? I definitely thought they all should be special permits so that you guys would have some more latitude as to conditions and things like that for any specific use like this.
I think everything would have to be special permits per.
Per the statute, yeah.
Yeah. 'cause
Okay.
you'd have to have the, affirmative approval, and I don't think just having, just being able to.
Yeah,
submit
yeah,
application,
site plan
so,
review, yeah.
For the cultivation in the B1, B2, and in IP, I mean, I think that's something that I think should be able to allow someone to propose something.
Okay.
And then, if it's one of those things where if we're concerned about, like smell or being like, certain things like nuisance, things like that, we can try to add in extra conditions, that might be like, extra filtration of the air for whatever reason to prevent smells getting out to the neighborhood, that kind of deal. But that would be, something we could see by a case-by-case basis.
Right, yeah, I mean, you could put in like specifics as to either lot size or even, a setback requirement for, say, the exhaust or whatever like that is, a certain distance from a property line if you wanted to consider that. We could put that stuff in. The one thing in here that kind of still stood out to me was like a delivery service. If you wanted to open a delivery service now for something else, it would probably be in a commercial zone. I didn't know if you wanted delivery service to be an accessory use to something, or you wanted to leave delivery service as it is. And if, because really a delivery service would just be a place where someone would store their trucks and have a little office area, and then they would conduct all the business off-site. I don't think it would fundamentally change how things work now. I mean, we can just leave that as an accessory use or a current use that we have. So I didn't think we necessarily needed to touch on that unless you guys wanted to do something different. That was the one thing that didn't really fit into the three categories that that were kind of established before that I tweaked a little bit.
But you have the delivery service as a definition that you would put under the whole.
Right.
Because
Even though if somebody wanted to say, if they wanted to open a FedEx place up or something like that, or an Amazon warehouse, I mean, that's kind of the same thing, but they wouldn't be warehousing anything at the site.
I don't know, I guess I don't see how delivery service really plays into the whole thing.
Yeah, it's kind of an outside operation, almost.
It's a
Yeah.
supporting
Yeah.
thing.
So, like, if somebody wanted to, say, open up a dispensary and then have a delivery service, they could just propose that as an accessory use. I don't think that would greatly alter, or if they just wanted to do a delivery service, they could base their office out of a certain area in town that fit in our regulations already. Unless you wanted to add that type of use to the zone and just to the business and industrial zones, we'd add delivery service in general, but I feel like it's already probably covered.
Rob, did you say you wanted to see a special permit for B3 for cultivation? Were you saying with cultivation you didn't want no for B1, B2, B3? Did I hear you say that?
B1 and B2, B3 I think was a no.
And I think the IP you said as well, right?
IP special permit.
Yeah, special permit for B1, B2, and IP.
I'm not sure I like that idea.
I'm not either.
I mean, it's a tight area, it's like you're
Right on 66.
I don't know, it seems, there are a lot of very tight areas along there.
Well, I mean, not all the properties on there are gonna be good real estate for cultivation. So it's not every single one of them, it could be, would have an opportunity, but say for, the example that, one of the farms on, over in that area, I think they fall into that category in that area. So, that would technically prohibit them from trying to get into that business. So I mean, it's one of those things where I'd rather be more permissive, and then if we decide that, you know, when somebody makes an application and we don't like the proposal, then at that point, then that would be when, you know, we make a decision of whether or not we want it. But I'd rather, you know, at least give people an opportunity to, you know, give us a proposal rather than say no automatically. Because it'll be harder for us to change it down the road.
Well, I guess my only thought is, if you wanted to say no and it was allowed via special permit in the regulations, you'd need a good reason to
Yeah.
deny them.
Yeah.
I guess in the future, if you, say it wasn't allowed now, and you had an applicant who wanted to come in to make a case for a zone change, and once you let the cat out of the bag or whatever, or Pandora's box open, they would be able to do that, and I don't know if you would be able to deny them at that point. I mean, you could then go back and then take it out of that zone if you wanted to, but you would, that use would then get grandfathered in. So I can kind of see both logics. It might be a little easier if somebody's like, well, I really want to build a cultivation facility at that spot, for them to come back to you and then make that case, and then us just make a proactive change for them. Versus somebody comes in, you guys really don't like that spot, but don't have a valid reason to deny them, and say, you still denied them, we'd go to court and potentially lose.
Yeah.
For whatever reasons, because if you can't cite something within the regulations or health or safety, it'd be a tough no vote for you guys to make, I think.
That's my feeling about it, is kind of letting the cat out of the bag in a way. And it does take a little bit of the decision-making away from us, because we've already said yes, in a way, with the special permit. You know, we have to have a really good reason to deny it. Whereas if we say no, we could always open the door. I just said what you said, but not as eloquently.
I think they were equally eloquent. Yeah, I mean, if you want, we can certainly think about this, in those zones, as to what you guys want to do. You know, this is just a first crack at it. Okay, you know, mull it over in your mind and see what you want to do. We could certainly open up one of them if you wanted to try.
I think it would be, I mean, in all fairness, it would be nice to hear from the public a little bit on this, just because, I mean, we can go back and forth on this.
Yeah.
But it's more like, you know, the people in those areas who would be most impacted by a cultivator moving in next door to them.
Right.
You know, and I can only speculate as to what that would be like, you know, but I can't imagine it would be any different than, say, a farm that spreads manure every spring to fertilize the farm. You know, that's gonna smell.
Right.
It's got a very strong smell to it, so, you know, it's kinda in the same vein, I guess, at least from, you know, my perspective of it. So, you know, it's something I would say that, you know, I would love some community feedback on that one.
So I guess we can kind of leave those as question marks for now, and then hopefully we get some public participation before the public hearing. Maybe when we have another application up. You know, I guess we're not drawing too much enthusiastic support or opposition at this point. So what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll just make that a question mark for now, and we can, you know, mull that over and discuss it further.
Can we have just a general discussion, Dan, about what leeway do we as a commission have to reject an application under the special permit category?
So you have more leeway. I would say a site plan, you're very, so, you know, there's 3 levels of approval. There's administrative by me.
Yep.
That's permitted by right, permitted by site plan, which really, if the applicant meets the site plan requirements, it should be approved. Special permit is where you guys have the most legislative latitude in terms of making your decisions. And really it's, you know, health, safety, and I think property taxes as well, that factor into that.
Health, safety, and
Yeah, and part of it is what we're looking at is kind of the purpose and authority of the zoning regulations. Section 1.2. You know, you have your jurisdiction. I mean, those are some of the considerations you wanna look at. And then I think it also goes through that in section 10 as well. Or is it 9? No, I think it's section 10. So you have like review criteria as well. Well, I guess that's on a zone change. But yeah, so there's different things listed out in the regs, but short of it is usually health, safety, and property values. But also you can add other things to your regulations for consideration.
Yeah, that's a discussion I'd love to have sometime.
What's
Adding
it?
other things to the you know, other considerations besides health, safety, and property values.
right.
Yeah, and I could bring in Carrie at some point to also weigh in on this. 'Cause and I guess I'd have to go back and read the statutes to see how they read in terms of approvals through the process. Because I don't think we could contradict the statutes. We certainly could expand upon what they talk about, I think. But we couldn't contradict what's in the statutes as far as, you know, special permits or special exceptions would go. So I can certainly.
Did that answer? But I think-
So.
So.
You know, it's still a question in my mind is, under what situations can we deny an application when it's a
So
special permit?
usually you would need to cite, whatever your denial is, it should be based upon the testimony given at the meeting, whatever's been submitted to the meeting via the public or, you know, the applicant's testimony. Just anything that happens in the meeting and anything that's submitted. That's kind of the record that you're kind of looking at. So you would need to find flaw in that, you know.
But typically you, as a zoning official, you vet these before they come to us. I mean, so if they didn't meet requirements, if they didn't meet regulations, chances are it wouldn't get to us.
Yes and no. I mean, I can't tell somebody they can't apply. I could tell somebody they may not align with the regulations in a certain way, but certain things like, you know, I've seen a special permit denied, and one of the reasons was given was they did not feel the internal traffic pattern of the site was safe. This was at a gas station. I'm not saying I necessarily disagreed or agreed with what the commission's thought, but that's something that they felt was enough for denial. It wasn't safe. That in this, that I've litigated multiple times in terms of trying to get this approval done. For the most part, it does meet the regulations, but the commission felt that it wasn't safe.
What about a situation where you have just tremendous public opposition?
So,
Something.
yes, I mean, that makes your job very, very tough.
Right.
If the public opposition is citing valid things in the regulations, and certainly, say if there's big public opposition and you are unsure as to whether that is what the opposition stating is correct or not, you can always ask staff to get you more feedback from whatever professional might provide you, you know, an adequate response as to a yay or nay. You know, I'm sure we're gonna face an application sometime in the future with that, so, you know.
Well, I mean, just, let's use this cannabis thing as an example.
Mhm.
Sometimes the public opposition isn't something that you can, you know, you can say for sure is going to happen or not, but what would happen if somebody said, well, I don't want a cannabis a cultivator next to me because it's gonna smell. I mean, we know that they do smell.
Yeah, it's
You know what I
tough.
mean?
Yeah,
It's-
that's tough. I mean, you could look to mitigate that as much as possible. I would say if it's allowed in the regs and they meet the regulations, it is tough to deny it, even if the
That's
public
what that's what I mean.
doesn't want it. You know.
Something like that, though, would definitely affect your property values. You know, if you buy a house and
Could
you, and
argue
your
that,
next door
too.
neighbor, you know, is one thing, and then that changes, it definitely affects the value of your property. And so, in that respect.
Yeah, it's
it-
tough.
It,
But-
That might be someone's opinion that it's gonna affect the property value.
Right,
But will it?
right,
Truly?
right.
That might be their opinion.
They could feel it will affect their property value, but it may or may not.
so you really don't have a leg to, really
Well,
don't have a
sometimes.
leg to
Well, if they
stand on,
provided-
really, with these health, safety, and.
If they
health
provided
values.
evidence, substantial evidence,
Right.
that this was gonna negatively, and they were like, here's a report from a appraiser, or here's this or that, that would be something that, from an expert, per se.
Right.
That's something that you might be able to go with. Now, certainly, they really feel like this was made in error, there's also a forum to appeal to. Whether you issued the permit or not. If you denied the permit that somebody is asking for, they could appeal because they feel like your reasoning was incorrect. If you approve it, a neighbor could appeal that with your reasoning being incorrect. So, and then, the courts would play that out in an even more, in-depth way. But primarily what the courts are gonna be looking at is the record that you've received. They're not gonna be submitting new testimony or new evidence. It's really the record that this board looked over. So if you get compelling evidence, and then even if you were like, oh, we wanna verify that, that might be something that my office needs to go through and look at for you and get some sort of expert to review. So certainly if you ever want more information, please let me know. I don't want you to make a decision you feel is uninformed, or if you're getting feedback from members of the public that you're not sure about, that's something we can try to look at it for you more in depth. And,
So it sounds like our job as commission members is to try and distinguish fact from opinion.
in a way,
When
but,
there's public feedback.
yeah, I guess that's me framing it a little bit as to how my mind would work.
Right. Yeah.
I prefer to work off fact, but, certainly public opinion is out there. And, whether or not a certain area a certain facility had unsafe internal traffic flow, that was, what the commission felt. The applicant certainly didn't feel that way, and they, had a traffic engineer there, and they felt that it was safe. Commission didn't buy what their expert was saying. They felt that, in their minds, that it was still unsafe. So that's why it ended up getting denied. So
I always find it tough to challenge an engineer because they know a heck of a lot more than I do.
I'm not gonna say whether this engineer knows more than you, Bob, but yeah, I would agree with your sentiment, but at the same time, if you're hearing from their engineer and the public is saying, no, that's wrong, we got Jeff. I mean, Jeff's great. So we can always ask for more feedback from Jeff, but usually Jeff's thorough enough, and we have, fortunate enough to have him, involved as much as he is in this town, where, he's actively involved in all these things. So we do have a very good engineering perspective to begin with. This might be something that we can have, some land use training on. Maybe this is something we can touch on. I know something else has come up where, ZBA may want, some FEMA training, and I'm trying to do it all together. There's something with the FEMA that came up recently that's probably gonna end up going before them. So that was something that they wanted, so this could be a good opportunity to have maybe Carrie, expound, and, we'll see. She may have a slightly different opinion on a few things,
From
but
a legal perspective.
yeah, I would say her words would carry certainly more weight than mine. If she has any differing opinion, I would certainly acquiesce to whatever she's saying. So that's something I'll keep in mind is criteria for approval.
Well, along the same lines as your question about the special permit,
Mhm.
I mean, I guess I may not understand the purpose of special permit. I mean, it seems to me it's kind of like a way of not making a commitment, of not having an opinion, of not, like, it's kind of, you're saying, okay, well,
Maybe.
you know, right, and it seems like, I mean, this is, I think Rose brought this up, because I think it was Rose who was talking about, special permits with the corner lots and things like that. She said, you know, just, I mean, if you put it special permit, you're just delaying making a decision, and then you're making it harder to make a decision, because you're kind of tying your hands in a way. I mean, what's the benefit?
It allows you to take it case by case.
But.
So you're saying.
You have the same ability, if you say no, and somebody comes to you and says, I wanna do this, you can still say,
Well,
take it case by case and
But-
say yes.
But I think the special permit allows you to make all kinds of, to make whatever little condition adjustments that you feel would be necessary that really can't be addressed in a standard blanket approval or.
Yeah,
So-
Chantel's right. You're allowed to add conditions to a special permit that you wouldn't to a site plan. If the site plan meets the regs, you should approve it as it is. Whereas a special permit, you can judge each site on its own merits in a way. While it might be, so you think it might be appropriate in parts of this zone, there are certain areas in that zone where it might not be appropriate, depending on how it's set up or how they're proposing it. So it just gives you more latitude in terms of asking a developer to do different things to try to improve the application, and it gives you more latitude to have reasons to deny it.
But that's probably less like, the reason to deny it, I think, is not as much of an issue as just making sure that things are done so that it is the way we want it to be, I think.
Okay, so an example of that would be, when we approved that subdivision on, is it Ames Hollow Road, and we asked that they not use pesticides.
Yeah,
Right?
well, so every
was
subdivision
Is that what you're
is
talking about?
more
Is
like
that
a special
an example
permit.
of what you're talking about?
It's probably not it's not in the regulations that pesticides cannot be
Right,
used.
but
But
for
the
that
commission
subdivision,
For that particular situation, we thought that was,
right, and because of the wetlands, okay.
yeah.
So because that was in special permit, that we were able to do that?
We were able to do that.
Yeah, so like every subdivision is a special permit. There is no site plan approval for subdivision. That always goes to public hearing. And I guess the difference between special permit and site plan approval is, site plan approval is not a public hearing. Whereas special permit allows more input from the public and things of that nature. It just gives you broader authority as to whether you want this and how you want it to
It doesn't give
be.
you broader authority over a no.
Well, a no just means absolutely not. You
Well-
absolutely cannot do this in this zone. They would have to come and either get you to agree to allow it via special permit or allow it via site plan. And a no and there's no administrative there. So, no is, no is absolute. Site plan provides more, kind of assurance as to the applicant meeting the criteria that they'll get an approval. What special permit does, it isn't a guaranteed approval. The last town I worked with, everything was by special permit. I think it's good that in our regulations, certain things you have are by site plan approval, because it gives the applicant more concrete assurance that if I'm gonna spend X amount of money to move forward with this, I'm gonna get it.
So what's your thought process as far as determining, okay, this is a site plan versus a special permit?
Definitely like just potential impact on the surrounding community in the area. And again, you know, something like a personal service in the B2 zone, you know, you're either, you know, you're getting like a, so like the hairdresser, she's coming in for a site plan review. I mean, well, I'm not gonna talk about that one, that's pending. So if you had a retail store that wants to go in to a strip mall, I mean, does that seem that, you know, that's why that strip mall is there?
Right.
You know, it shouldn't be a big deal for for a retail store to go in there, or for a restaurant to replace a retail store. As long as they meet parking requirements, that seems like an appropriate use. You know, regardless of, you know, what kind of store it is. Whereas special permit, you know, like I don't know if it's like a package store, we'll say. I know we didn't talk about package stores or whatever, but I know there's a lot of different things that go into where a package store could go, or if you know, let me bring up the regs. Let me find a good example.
So would another situation be if the application is not specifically spelled out in our regulations? So it doesn't fit into a slot in our.
So I will always, so I guess on my end, when I'm vetting it, I will always tell them it either fits into a permitted use or it doesn't. They could certainly try to apply for something that I told them is not a permitted use. At that point, you could deny them if you've agreed with me. They could try to convince you that it was. So I guess one thing by special permit, aircraft landing areas, helicopters. That's probably not something that site plan. You want somebody to, so helicopters be landing next to their house. You kind of want to know the frequency. You know, obviously we're getting reviews for safety from the fire marshal and things of that nature, but if you wanted a helicopter pad, probably be nice for neighbors to be able to weigh in as to whether helicopters can land here and in what sort of, and if you did want to allow them to say if it was by site plan approval, I want a helicopter pad. They meet the criteria, they get the helicopter pad. You have no control over how that helicopter pad may operate. Maybe you think with a special permit, this is inappropriate at these times of day. This is inappropriate without some sort of screening. This is inappropriate in that spot because it's just too densely, it's in a densely packed residential area. Something like that.
Well,
and even like different zones have different requirements. Like, you know, we don't allow assembly packing or warehousing in RI, but we do in IP and I. I don't know why they decided that at the time, but that was the discussion that they had.
But Dan, in addition, and you touched on it before, in addition to the whole difference between something just being a site plan approval and being a special permit, the special permit triggers the public hearing, and that's where you get all of that other information.
Yeah, so I don't think we would want to deny somebody on a site plan approval from, you know, expressing their opinion about a certain project, but it's really more in the nuts and bolts of the proposal as to whether you should approve it, I think, than, you know, public input. Because you're not going to be able to really change what they want to do unless you can always deny something. I'll be honest with you. You guys could deny things that would be allowed in the regulations. You could do that. That person would need, I mean, it would be an abuse of power, I would say, but that person would need to then appeal to the courts, and if you denied them for a reason that was unjust, the courts would overturn your decision.
So, Dan, to kind of avoid us to keep going into the same loops here.
Yeah.
Any chance for you to get like kind of just like something written that like?
Well, what I'm thinking is we'll do the land use training.
Yeah.
And then you guys can ask Carrie as many questions, or John as many, you know, questions over the course of an hour. We can literally, you know, devote part of the land use training to this. I think that would probably be based on the length of this discussion, it would give you guys more confidence and a little more comfort level
That would
as
be
to
very
to how
helpful,
you're
I think.
operating.
Yes.
So, kind of going back to the proposed regulations.
Yep,
One of the things that I was looking at, when looking at the actual section 2.4 with the defined terms,
yep.
is that none of the definitions have any kind of numbering system to it, where the other sections do.
Yeah, so this isn't like a motion.
I know.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say is that, since we're gonna be adding in these definitions to, section 2.4, that since we're gonna be making the changes and going through the whole process, we add, a numbering system to all of those definitions and the tables, so that when you say, look at definition, 2.410, that way you know where to go and you can direct someone to it, rather than saying, look up the definition for, application. It just kind of gives you a little bit more, something that you can, point to.
Yep.
Because when you have the, like the brewery-related terms, you've got a bunch of terms there that are, everything else is in alphabetical order except for those terms, technically.
So I would probably
But then,
only put one number for brewery terms, and then keep it boxed off. Like, that's what I was kind of thinking for cannabis. I would have cannabis terms.
so what you could do is you could have the number, like, brewery-related items or terms, would be your like number, but then you'd have like 10A, 10B.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Because there's a lot of sections, that are very similar to, that are, sectioned off like that. And a lot of the tables don't have any kind of like, like you can't look at it and say, okay, if I'm looking at building height and I'm looking at the table for that, you have to say building height, table, diagram. At least you'd be able to say, you'd be able to point to it at least and, discuss it a little bit.
Sure. We can do that if the board wants. I don't see a big issue with that. I just gotta think about whether we can just say we're adding numbers. I think we can just say we're adding numbers to all of it. Yeah, I'll figure that out for you guys, if that's what you wanna do. Okay. I guess moving on, so I thought in talking with you guys last time, you only wanted the one retail store for now. I just wanted to go through that with you, because Rob wasn't sure he wanted to do just one store, so I wanted to make sure that we had that discussion again.
Well, I asked you, through the email, was more just the language on the prohibition. I wanted to just avoid saying, the prohibition on that. I'd rather see something, language that just says, one licensed retail establishments permitted in town. Rather than saying nothing, because, if we say, cannabis retail prohibition, that means, anybody who's looking at it, say for whatever reason, the guy that we did, grant the approval for, can't get a license, and so that means he doesn't, get his business. Now that we have this on there, it says that going forward, we're prohibiting any new retail establishments. So I would rather just say explicitly that we only want one retailer, like, one, Department of Consumer Protection licensed cannabis retailer, rather than saying, cannabis retailers are prohibited.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I chose this is when I was looking through, and I couldn't find the section in Middletown and how they did it. This was how Old Saybrook did it. They approved their store, and then they just prohibited they prohibited all new establishments, including cultivation and everything else. So I just tweaked it so it was retail and dispensary. But yeah, let me see if I can wordsmith something a little more to your liking.
I like that.
Okay.
What you could probably do, Dan, is take the language from the statute prior to the amendments from this year, because that's kind of what we were mirroring anyways, and relying on was the statute saying that, one per 25,000. So, you could almost literally take that word for word and just throw it in our regulations.
Okay.
I don't think Portland's ever gonna get to 25,000 people.
Well, I would, yeah, I'd probably just state that, yeah, I'll keep that in mind, because, yeah, we could either say, we could talk about the 25,000, or we could just say one, because it's not appropriate based on the population of the town or something like that. So, okay, let me work that out, and I'll probably reach out to Carrie on that one, just to make sure that the way I'm saying it, I guess I'm just, you know, if this is new for me, just try to say you can only have one. Usually it's like, you can do this in the zone. If you can do it in the zone, doesn't matter how many you can have in the zone, as long as it's, you know, it's, to me, it was more market driven before. So I'll try to figure out a better way to say that. And then, I guess this has turned out to be more simple than I thought it was gonna be, because, and I just wanna check with you guys. We can always add some things, say, on cultivation in terms of distance or lot size, or, I'm not sure how we can control the smell and put that in regs. I don't know if there's a measurement of, stinkiness. I don't know if there's a meter that there's, or like a concrete way to measure that. You know, maybe just but I thought the state has, you know, laid out how, you know, dispensaries work, cultivators work in terms of security and everything like that. And it made, in my mind, it kind of made sense to let those things control at this point. I'm not sure if we can, I mean, you could maybe stipulate some sort of security or something like that, but it seems like, you know, they require, it seems to be pretty Loctite as it is. But yeah, in terms of cultivation, if you wanted to, we could try, we could do either a lot size or distance, but my only concern about that is, like, the existing facility in town isn't on a huge lot, and it wouldn't really work with distances, you know, in terms of, you know, the building's gotta be like 100 feet away from the property line or something. That would exclude basically our whole industrial zone. So that's just something to keep in mind too.
Right, but in an industrial zone, there are all sorts of smells.
Right, so you could say
So-
maybe in the B2 or the B, I mean, you say if you wanted to do it, allow it in some of the other zones, you could stipulate a lot size. We would just have to be conscious that the way you stipulate it could potentially exclude the entirety of that zone.
But that's kind of the reason why I wanted to stay away from for the cultivation
Okay.
anyway. That's exactly the reason.
So that's just something to keep in mind, as we move forward. And I think that was mainly everything I had thought of. So I don't know if you guys had other thoughts or questions or things you wanted me to add. Certainly, you know, I'll go back and try to make these tweaks for everybody, get it in a little better format. And then we can, you know, discuss this some more at next meeting. And then, you know, at that point, see how ready we are to move forward and with a public hearing or something like that.
And when does the other thing expire?
February.
Okay.
So yeah, we have plenty of time. I know you want, the board wasn't looking to drag their feet in doing this,
Right.
but, you know, it gave us the time to hash this out in a way that, you know, a thoughtful way that you guys are comfortable with when applications come forward.
Okay, any other thoughts for Dan?
Other than thank you for the work on this.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
thank you,
appreciate it.
Dan.
No problem.
Okay, so then we'll plan on reviewing any updates at our next meeting,
You got it.
right?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll move on then to online material repository. So this is for kind of internal use, right?
Yeah, so I was thinking Google Drive. Do all of you have a Gmail account or different, you could set up you would have to set up a Google account for yourself, but this would be the free way for us to do this, and what we would
Is
do.
there gonna be in-house training on this?
If need be, certainly we can, we're still gonna mail you everything. You know, one day, if we don't, if not, I guess this was a thought that me and Liz had with this regulation, change. You know, we mailed out, we made, I don't know, 20, all these different copies of the regs. And I guess there was two thoughts. do you guys use your paper regs a lot, was the first question. And the second question was, if we did do changes, do you want the changes every single time for your paper regs? It'll certainly be reflected online every time. Or would it be appropriate if we just did it yearly for the updates? I don't know. It's a lot of work for Liz, and I just see us changing the regs like several times a year.
Yep.
And we push a lot of paper.
Yep.
So, if you like it the way it is, we'll keep going. It's just, food for thought, but I'll definitely, we'll update the Google Drive. We'll get you up on there. We can still email it out if that's what you want, and then at one point transition to Google Drive completely if that works. If you don't like it, we're here to make sure you get the info.
I have a suggestion, Bob. Bob,
Yes.
I think that Rob should give a training class on how to use everything.
It's really very simple.
Oh,
It
don't
is.
tell me it's very
It
simple.
is. You will get notified. You'll go in there. There'll be like, it's very simple.
Can Rob just do a training class?
I used to, we can try to do it. If you'd like Rob to, I'm not gonna deny Rob sharing his extensive knowledge. We did implement this with my ZBA, a little bit back in Old Lyme, at least with uploading
old were
recordings
those
and
people?
that. Older than you.
Oh,
So, and I have
know how old
a vast amount of confidence
how old I am.
in you guys.
He probably knows how old
Was
I
there
am.
any good answer to that question, Chantal?
But let's see.
Yeah, be careful, Dan.
Let's
Be
think about it.
very,
We-
very
we-
I'm
careful.
aware.
So
We
here's
will
a
need-
question. If we're able to put everything onto like a Google Drive, all the materials are available for the public, correct?
On the Google Drive?
Well, like, for all the materials that we get as part of our packets for every meeting, that's all stuff that the public can get access to, correct?
Yeah, either hard copy through our office, or we could
So,
work with them to send it to
would
them.
there be a way to get that Google Drive to be, like, available on, like, the town website as a link where somebody can go in and get a read-only copy of those documents?
I can talk to,
oh, Dave, look at Dave. No, we're not gonna do that.
I'll talk to our esteemed IT staff and see whether that's possible, and get back to you.
Yeah, that's gonna be an issue as far as to the public, because then you don't want a link on a public site that anybody can click on. You need credentials to.
Yeah, I think it could be a security issue, because then they're getting on our server. Now, if it was hosted on a third-party server, and
Yeah, we're
we,
Wix. the
but I'm
Google-
saying so if there was a separate Google account
Yeah.
for that reason for the public to access.
The school could,
If you guys have the Google Drive, I think it'd be fine if you made a link that the public could access and download those files. We could also host them on Wix, that might be more like an administrative.
Yeah, so I would probably lean towards if we could figure out, I could make a separate account on Google, read only, as this very smart gentleman has talked about, for the public, rather than burdening an overburdened IT staff.
I keep all the balls in the air.
Yeah, so, no, you do a great job, Dave, we love you.
I'm not trying to add more work for you, Dave, just thinking, because I know that at some point or another, I know if somebody hears that we have a Google Drive account, they're gonna
Yeah,
want a digital
yeah, so,
copy.
but as it is now, everything's available to the public in our office, and anything, we do email out certain pieces of applications if people want. So yeah, it is available, but we can look into that. Let me, step one, get you guys up and running, and then we can work on that.
Well, maybe we should all bring our laptops next time and have a little, like, a test or
Do we have
training
Wi-Fi?
session. I don't know, I kinda like that.
Do we have Wi-Fi?
All right, well, let me get it set up, and we'll do it in the next meeting or two.
One step at a time.
Yeah.
Let's not do it the first November meeting now.
Right.
No, but we might have,
It's gonna be a
we
long
might have
night.
another meeting in October.
That's gonna get
Oh,
continued
I don't know
regardless.
if I'll be here
Dan,
for the first
if
November
we do a training session, does that have to be during a meeting if we're all together? Is that,
Yes.
Yeah, well, you have to, otherwise we have to
Forum.
notice it.
okay.
Well,
I mean, because if we do land use training, that's not technically a meeting, though, it's just training.
if we're not talking about any pending applications, I'd probably still want to take minutes and record it. There's a CVS in Clinton that they didn't want. And there's a CVS there now, because they had a meeting without minutes of a quorum of their officials, and they went to court, and CVS used that against them, and there's no official record of what, they all said they didn't talk about that CVS, but that was not,
That group of people got together.
yeah, they got together for zoning business, and they didn't keep any minutes or anything. So that was problematic. And I'll probably end up recording whatever we do. I'll probably do the training via Zoom and record it for the future, and for any, future commissioners to use, just so that we can sort of, because this is gonna be biannual training, and hopefully we can not have to spend money every year. I mean, we can reuse some of the ones that were useful and maybe reintroduce stuff based on your questions and needs. But ideally, I know we have it budgeted, but I'd like to try to be as fiscally prudent as possible with the money I do get.
Okay, so progress and more to come.
Yes, yeah, so I was trying to set up the Google Drive, but the verification was a problem for me because they kept wanting to use the town clerk's phone number, and I was having issues trying to use my phone number. So I may just have the clerk verify it and then try to work through there. Somebody set one up at some point, I can't find out who it was. So I'm trying to work through that, and Google is very user-friendly, but there's no one to call. There's no one to call and be like, this is going on, so I'll figure it out, and maybe my colleagues in the IT department, my esteemed colleagues, can help me. An old man such as myself.
This is the old man.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, we'll move on then to staff report. Any correspondence?
I don't have any correspondence, but I did want to talk to you about the regulation changes we made, just to make sure.
Sure.
Because now they're coming into effect and now we're implementing them. Did you guys just want to have the corner lot reduction on the side for fences? Or were you thinking about all structures? Because the way it's worded and written, it's all structures.
I thought it was all structure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
So I just want to make sure, because parts of it kind of contradict, like, the way the shed, so if you have a shed under 200 square feet, you get reduced shed setbacks. But that reduced shed setback is contingent upon you being a certain distance from the street. So I have like two regs here that kind of co-compete. So if you wanted to build a shed bigger than 200 square feet, you can put it, say, in the situation I was in today, he could put it 10 feet from the side property line, but he'd have to be 30 feet from his new, now rear property line. But if you wanted to use the reduced shed setbacks and get 5 and 5, you still got to meet that 55 feet from the street. But my only concern with the way the regs are written right now is you can have somebody build a garage, they'll meet that rear setback, but they can shove it up 10 feet from that street property line in the R10 zone. Or if they wanted to build their house, and they could put it 10 feet from that side property line in the R10 zone. So you could really, not that I think somebody wants to do it at the house, but certainly I have a feeling that somebody could do it with the garage. And so you may have a situation where somebody's pushing a building, while it'll maintain distance from that next house over, it's gonna potentially crowd the street a bit. So I wanted to just make sure that what was passed is what you wanted. You wanted all structures, and because my original, and I know this goes back to when I was here the first time, to a fence variance, that a 6-foot fence couldn't, and I believe it ended up getting denied. I'm not sure. It was right when I was leaving. So I just wanted to make sure you guys meant all structures and not just fences.
Did you ask Rose that? Because I know she was,
I didn't ask Rose yet, no. Yeah, I wanted to, well, because at this point,
well, I know it's our regulation, but she did really
okay.
help.
Okay, so, but I just didn't know, because what your intent was
Yep.
at the time.
My thinking is all structures.
Okay. Now, we could certainly keep it that way, and I could certainly talk to Rose and make sure that that's what she wanted to do as well, if that's what you want.
So that allows the garage to, like someone to build a garage 10 feet?
In the R10, so on the corner lot now, you can take advantage of the reduced setback there. And the side setback's always less. So in the R10, it's 10 feet, I wanna say R15, it's 10 feet. R25, it's 20. And the RR is, R25, it's 15, and the RR, it's 25. So it is, structure-wise, it's a big change based on the front and front. So it's just something to keep in mind. That option is out there now for people. If we do want to keep it for all structures, at this point, I think it would make sense to, I don't know if it makes sense for the reduced shed setbacks to keep, I mean, you could keep 55 feet from the street, and then they can get 5 and 5, but like I was telling this guy, you either need to be 55 feet from the street, and then you can do 5 and 5 over here, or you can go 10 feet from the street, but you gotta be 30 feet from that neighbor's property line over there. So in the end, it's workable, I just have to kind of make my brain understand that and be able to articulate it to people.
Now, are there any possible changes we'd be able to make that would make it easier, or?
No, it's really the fundamental question as to whether you want this to apply simply for, I wasn't sure if you really wanted to just have this be for fences, if that was the intent, or if it was all for all structures. Because as unlikely it is somebody's gonna wanna offset their house on a corner lot into the street, they can do it, and I tend not to, I don't know, people are liable to do anything within the rules, if that's what they are, so I really can't predict that no one's gonna do that. It's unlikely, but it could be a possibility. So what I'll do is I'll talk to Rose, see what she said, and I'll report back to you.
Thanks.
Could it be structures of a certain size? Size of the structure?
Yeah, you could do
So
size of the
it
structure.
could be like a huge garage or someone's whole house.
Yeah, we could potentially tweak it in a way. Yeah, we'll have to look at it. Let me see what Rose thinks, and then we'll talk about it and see
Yeah,
how
'cause
you
I
guys wanna
think
move forward.
She kind of drove this because of the number of,
Variances on corner lots, yeah.
Yes.
And the feeling was people were losing losing the use of a lot of their side yards.
yeah.
Right. No, that's a fair point. It just, that's the competing interest you're kind of going, I guess, whether you want to have some sort of space off the street for these structures or not. And I think originally that was the intent. And then the only other thing it complicates, so now that we have, the way lot depth and width are measured are kind of impacted. So depending on the layout of a lot, a house may have to face a certain direction to meet the minimum lot width and depth of the zoning regulations. Whereas before, when both were front, you could measure it either way. So what is it, 4 Dogwood is for sale, and the house used to face Dogwood. And it's a little, I'm still trying to figure out, because it was completely torn down because it was, there's a hoarding issue there. But the new house, it may have to face Spring Street now. They can have the driveway on Dogwood, but to meet zoning, the house would have to face Dogwood, no, Spring Street. So I'm still working a couple things out, just because the regs are new, and it's different than, most towns, it's always front, side. So we're atypical in that regard now. But let me see what Rose says, and then we can take it from there.
Okay. Okay, then we'll move on to public comment, and the commission will now hear any brief comments on any topic except for pending applications. So we have no one in the room here, anyone online? Nothing in chat, okay. Then we'll move on to the approval of minutes from September 15th. And present at that meeting were myself, Chantal, Rob, Carolyn, Victoria, Ken. Everyone was present, so may I have a motion to approve those minutes, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the minutes from 9:15 are approved, and then may I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the meeting is adjourned.